capture. All right, we'll go ahead and call to order the policy subcommittee meeting on February 24th, 5:30. Start with the invocation. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for letting us come together tonight. Give us the wisdom as we work through the county's business. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Actually, before we do that, a couple of changes real quick on item 3C. Scratch the words "and possibly approve" or the possible approval, so it'll read discussion of the draft Kronos timekeeping policy. And item 3D, we can scratch that whole item off the agenda. So with those changes, is there an approval?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Holt.
Second.
Second by Ms. Strong. All in favor?
Aye.
So that's unanimous. Recognition of the public. Anyone like to speak on an agenda item? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on. Approval of the minutes, December 16th, 2019.
I'll make a motion. I don't know if I remember exactly what went on.
Yeah, you wasn't
in
here. You wasn't here. So you
Well,
make a
then
motion,
somebody
I'll
else needs to make a
second.
motion.
There's
You
Miss
can make a
Judy.
motion as to form.
Me and Judy
the
was here, so I'll
content.
make a
Judy?
motion.
Catherine wasn't here.
I wasn't.
No, that's
here.
fine, Ms. Judy.
Wait a minute or something.
We would like to, for you to make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
so moved.
So motion by Ms. Judy. I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? So that's unanimous. All right. Moving on, report of committee chairman. Nothing specific, so we'll move ahead to the item 3, report of the finance director.
About 2 weeks ago, I sent a draft policy, I believe, to virtually everyone. This is a hope to update the current policy, which is about 6 years old and quite outdated at this point, doesn't really follow practices closely. Before we get into it, there's actually a second copy I'd like to go through the highlighted areas, because there's been a few requests by departments, not many, and nothing that would really have a negative impact on internal controls or operations. When everybody receives a copy, and I hope everybody's had a chance to look through the actual policy.
This is what we had last month, right? At the last meeting we looked at.
We mailed it there about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about it, I believe, since then. When everybody's ready, I'll go through the few changes, because there's very few. On page number 5, there was a request that if we did have to cancel a purchase order for basically response, which we usually don't have, they did ask if they could be notified, which that's a very reasonable request. I think it's a big improvement. On page number 7, they requested the word "payments unless necessary shall be after receipt and acceptance of goods or services." We generally like to have payment after receipt of goods and services, because it could end up in litigation to recover our funds, but there are certain circumstances where it's necessary to pay in advance, and there's more and more of those lately. Even though I think the policy covered that, but I still think it's clear with the word "necessary."
Is there any examples there of when payments shouldn't be after receipt?
Well, usually if you're buying
Objects.
objects or even services, in most instances, if you can, you need to pay them after receipt, because it saves us possible litigation. Because if we pay them and then they don't perform, then we have to litigate. But if we don't pay them and they don't perform, basically we won't pay them until they do perform.
But sometimes you have to sign contracts to
Right.
where you pay a portion up front and then you pay as you go. Maybe it's design work or something like that, and that's pretty standard. So if you just
Software,
make it
maintenance agreement,
fixed, then it makes it difficult to be able to have flexibility.
Okay.
software,
Do we need
maintenance.
is there a possibility that may be taken advantage of necessarily? I mean, should we spell out what scenarios might exist?
Usually we keep a pretty good eye on it, talk to the departments. It's very rare there's prepayments, and when they are prepayments, they justify. For instance, it's usually like the big old columns down at the Greenway. We had to pay for those in advance, but we couldn't get them anywhere else. Occasionally, I think Mr. Carey's bought some software. We had to pay for it in advance. There's certain things that we do, but if we can at all, we try to.
I guess my main thing is, or my main point is, who will deem if it's
finance.
Board of Salt work together.
Yeah.
We usually don't have an issue on that. We just discourage it as much as possible because of concerns. And it's rare that anybody pays
You all
anything.
have
Follow that.
any issues on that, Ms. Judy?
Because when you start putting rules, you're gonna end up with more and more exceptions to the rules, and it's more and more convoluted, it just causes more and more confusion. Every time I try to put extra clarification, it just causes usage.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, the definition of unless necessary.
Right.
If that was up to interpretation.
That means generally if you can't buy it without paying it in advance, or it's significantly cheaper from the vendor, they won't sell it to you unless it's cheaper. That's usually the way we go by it. Or if it's a necessity in the bid. We have 3 or 4 bids and the cheapest one requires that. The next thing, it has vendor's name vendor number or official name. It used to have and would have been better because it probably does cut down on the number of errors, but with working with the departments, we see that we can still catch those. We don't think so this is an issue.
Have all those duplicate vendor numbers and all that been cleared up now?
Oh, yeah, we merged all
All that's been cleared up?
unless there's a reason for a duplicate, there's not a reason, such as there's 2 different vendors with the same name. But there's very rarely that there's different addresses.
Well, I know, for example, like Rogers Group, they have one address we submit payment for hot mix at 2, and another address that we submit payment to for stone. It's crazy. But they have 2 different vendor numbers.
Right.
So that's what we go by.
That's
But-
rare, right. Most of the time, it's multiple addresses, like Verizon, they may have multiple.
Yeah.
But they'll have address 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
So we've merged as many of those as we think we can get away with and still make it work well.
What was the hesitation of and?
We thought it may increase the number of errors for people selecting, but the thing is, when they have to get the numbers, they may mismatch them together anyway, so other people look at them, so it's really not saving that much time. We think it could cut down errors, but not enough to really worry about with additional work on the departments.
I mean, like, whoever made the request, why, is it difficult or whatever to supply both?
They would actually have to go in the system at times and look it up and make sure they're matching them.
Yeah, that would be a pain.
If they don't have the numbers
It's
already.
just, you gotta make it
It's
user-friendly
more
or you're gonna have a
work.
lot of errors.
Well,
For whatever
thing-
reason,
yeah,
for
that's
this
what I was
process
asking.
that this references, this process right here, we don't do through Munis. We just have an Excel spreadsheet that's been provided to us by the finance department that we go in. So in order for me to get the vendor number, I could just keep a list of the vendor numbers in my office of all the vendors that I deal with, or I'd have to go into Munis every time, which is a pain.
We thought that there was more labor involved in the departments than the possible errors it's gonna cut down.
Okay.
We could much easier get back the potential mispayment versus the additional work,
Okay.
after talking to the departments. The other was just some clarifications. Under bid procedures, we used to have a separate section for exemptions from bids. It made more sense to actually move that up under bid procedure, so we got rid of Roman numeral 7 and actually made it A. And then there also was a request, the statute says like items purchased within a physical year, $10,000, but for clarifications, like items or single items, we put a single item or like items. And then even though it says, to be at least $10,000, we thought it was clear because occasionally people just skim them to put, number 1 down there, annually fiscal year purchases of like items. Even though it repeats that, we put it down just to make sure it wasn't missed, which was a good point. People occasionally miss stuff. The next one is the same one, the as necessary. We generally try to get, we have it says a lead time of 10 days, but we rarely to ever make anybody wait 10 days. We're to the point where we couldn't get them through that quickly. We do them as quick as we can, but we just put 10 days. And actually, we put as necessary again. The other one it was our intent, like if you look on page 11, after the bids are approved, there will be a posting on the website of the bids received. It's always been Finance Department our intent, but I was actually asked that question, who's gonna do the posting, so we put that in by Finance Department personnel to clarify that. The other one was on page 13. If you have an emergency purchase, we do need an explanation because we've got to go to prove that to the auditor or just in the records that it's an emergency purchase. Their request, instead of having a separate attachment, if the explanation field was long enough, if they could just put it in the description field of requisition, we think that's a good idea too, if it'll fit. So most of these are very good,
If it
reasonable
doesn't
requests.
fit.
Then they'll just need to do an attachment. Yeah, that's understood. And then on 16, several of the departments has told us it's hard for the May 31st cutoff date. Talking to their staff, we think if we work with the departments, that we can probably stretch that to June 5th and still be able to close the books in time. It's our feelings we can move that forward almost a week. And it would accommodate the departments significantly, is my understanding.
What was the,
It used to be May 31st, it's always been May 31st, but we feel with them working through us and helping us obtain those invoices at June, that we can still move it forward.
okay.
Do we need to go over any of the changes in the main policy? Does anybody have questions or comments, concerns, or something they feel needs to be?
You've addressed
changed?
everybody's concerns, haven't you?
Haven't heard a whole lot. We went and talked to several of us. I called, couldn't get hold of Catherine. I called your voicemail, but I didn't leave one because I couldn't get hold of you. I'm saying you're probably in court. You're probably in court, so I didn't leave you a voicemail, but I called a couple of times. I think I talked to Judy before I even seen it originally. There's several of the requests from the departments that were incorporated in here too.
Yeah, I feel like it addressed all of our
I
initial
think so.
concerns, for sure.
We try to make
And I
it,
didn't see anything else, but
I think this had a lot more input in it, and I appreciate David taking the time to listen to everybody. That's
Yeah.
important, because if you don't make it user-friendly, I know sometimes the commission, you're coming here, you're listening to what's going on, but then the policies aren't followed. And so policies aren't any good if there's not something that people can follow, because they're always asking for exemptions or something else, and it just creates a difficulty on the finance side, a difficulty in the elected officials and department heads. So when everybody can work with it, work together, I think it's a good thing. So I'll move for approval if that's what you're looking for.
yeah, and I'll second it.
All right, so there's a motion by Mr. Holt, seconded by Mr. Lawing. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And it will go to financial management and then to commission, so if there's any concerns, it would still be something to email to me, we can bring to financial management if there's some overriding concern somewhere in the policy,
Okay,
because it's quite lengthy.
so that'll be in March, financial management.
Yes, sir, and we're hoping to make the April commission meeting to have the May 1st date.
All right. What about item B?
Item B is just the first draft for everybody's discussion. So, item B was just to compare to this one, if you had any questions about changes. So item B is just for comparative purposes.
Okay.
It's the original policy, sorry.
Okay.
Item C is the first draft of a timekeeping policy, because we're still in the process of trying to bring Kronos online in the next short little bit, and we've actually got a few departments online at this point. One thing you are gonna run into is you're gonna need a policy, because you can alter the timestamps. If we alter the timestamps and we don't put at least a short explanation, then it makes it non-auditable by finance, audit, and wage and hour if you have issues. So we really need something short and sweet and user-friendly. We have little drop-down boxes, but this, as I say, this is the first draft, because we've already ran into a few things that we were probably gonna need to look at. For instance, deputies. Their computers don't always allow them to log in, so actually they run, even though they're hourly, they run from schedules unless something's changed. So this is probably a good starting point for the committee to bring back to all of their different people to see what's a good idea to actually get a up and running system.
And some of this is gonna be trial and error too. And I will tell you this, Mr. Chairman, there's been some very constructive meetings between finance and IT, and they're working together to try to implement the system. Finance has got a good grasp on it. IT is gonna be doing the training, and I think finally, it may take us another 6 months or so, but we're gonna finally skin this cat after, what, 5 years or
Oh, yeah.
something?
We ran into more
And
problems.
so, it's good we're working together, and I think in the end, even though sometimes there's challenges, it'll produce a better product, because you got more eyes looking into it. And of course, David is always very sensitive to the internal controls to make sure that the system's not compromised, because you're dealing with people's paychecks. So,
We
an
wanted-
important process, but so far I think we're making progress. Is that pretty pretty on track, David?
And one of the big reasons for the whole system is we have so many hourly employees. If we ever have a wage and hour concern, it's better to be on an electronic system. So the sooner, because of our growth rate, the sooner we can get on one, the better. And get on one that's that wage and hour could audit successfully.
From an IT standpoint, Mr. Carey, do you have anything to add to that?
Not at the moment.
So do we need
What
to?
is the holdup with this system? Why is it taking so long to?
They came in and treated us like one entity. We have, I believe, several personnel policies in all 16, I'm sorry, and all 32 plus departments all interpret it differently.
Yeah.
And then some of the Kronos rules haven't been the most intuitive, so I've had some issues. If we sent some of the rules the way Kronos wanted them to you, you would pop off the roof. I don't blame you. It would be
Yeah.
awful.
Well, and you know, they're not taking into consideration, you know, like, a lot of cities have this, but cities are more centralized government. I mean, we have a lot of silos. You know, you're
Yeah.
elected, Judy's elected, I'm elected, the sheriff's elected. And so you have all these policies and procedures, and they're a little bit different. John's elected. So we gotta take that all in consideration, and departments. It's not like municipal government, because it's pretty much just, it's centralized.
And we
Is
started.
Kronos just not really designed in that way, or it's just been more difficult working with them to make that happen?
Well, there's two things. One, we started out, you know, we're currently with Excel sheets or however people keep their time records. So it's manual. We started out with no IT from a ramp up from ground zero.
Mm-hmm.
Got about 2/3 of the way through, and then Kronos came back and said they would give us a great deal if we went into the cloud, which makes a lot of sense. So that brought us back to basically ground zero again. At the same time, they wanted us to do I think launch every department at one time, which has been kind of a concern. I think Mr. Carey right now is evaluating that to see how he feels about their stuff. But
And you know, when you're dealing with people's pay, well, I'll just use you, Catherine, as an example. You're an elected official, you mess up the pay of all your employees, they're not gonna be happy. And they're gonna let you know about it. And that's a big concern, so we got to be very careful, because once we do that, then you create this huge problem. So if you tried to implement it countywide and everybody's paycheck got messed up,
just over 1,000 of them.
that would be a nightmare for finance to try to straighten out
I
in
mean,
a
not really from the
reasonable way.
departments, and the departments too.
Right. So we have to be careful what we do.
And I believe Catherine's one of the earlier ones we're gonna try to watch. Was at one time, I don't know, you might ask Mr. Carey though.
But
They're still
we're gonna
evaluating
get yours
the schedule.
right.
Oh, mine's very different than everybody else's, so.
Everybody's is, that's what it is.
Everybody's is, that's a problem.
Catherine's, everybody's
I made
is.
mine way more complicated.
We've got rules of ways, which they comply with wage and hour, they comply with your personnel policies. But over the years, things have developed here very unique.
Yeah.
And if it's within your personnel policy, within state statute, and within wage and hour, we're trying to accommodate every one of those, and it came from, I think they thought about 30 rules, there's several thousand rules in the
Yeah.
system now.
And not everybody works the same days, not everybody's on the same schedule. It's a real
They got
challenge.
rounding rules all over the place, it's unusual and.
So is this policy gonna be like part of our personnel policies, or does the county have one timekeeping policy and then we'll have to also adopt this policy, or we'll have our own, or how does this work?
I think the best thing would be for everybody to get together and try to develop a policy they can live with that we think the system would be wage and hour compliant with.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think everybody wants the same goal. And kind of what we're looking at, if you, like for instance, when your employees log in, there'll be a timestamp. Occasionally, you're gonna have to alter that. You know, if your employee forgets to log in.
Right.
Goes to training, they don't wanna use their iPhone. We've got little drop-down boxes that tell that makes it audible by, because it says we're supposed to pre-audit in finance. Makes it audible by county audit. And then if wage and hour comes in and there's anything, somebody says, for instance, Catherine told me to log in later earlier, then there'll be those boxes to as a record. And then also there's a sign off by the employee and you.
Okay.
When you sign off, it's gonna have all those records to protect you if we have wage and hour, or, you know, what'll happen in the future. That's my concern right now. We need to find a policy that everybody can live with as far as how to mark those edits. If we don't have some way to mark them, then everybody will be doing it different. If the system's ever audited, I don't know if it'll be,
Even worth, yeah,
it won't protect us from wage and hour, which is our biggest thing.
right.
Or anything else. So mine here's a first ideal draft, but as looking at it, it may need to be when everybody puts their input, may need to be changed even more. Because a good example is the deputies at the sheriff's department.
Right.
They have no way to hour in every time because their cars aren't always connected.
Yeah.
So they actually run from schedule unless they work over and then they alter it at that point.
Mhm.
Most people would fit within this though, but there's a lot of outliers and that stuff. We'll need input from like the sheriff, probably you if you have any weird outliers that you think about. But you guys know more about it than we do. We know what timesheets should look like, but we don't know what you guys need to do 100%.
So basically, it's a moving target, and this is just a report.
This is the first one for them to bring back to everybody, and hopefully they can work together and see back, this is what we would like to see,
Okay.
that we think we can live with, and it'll satisfy wage and hour
So-
requirements.
So with, well, suspend the rules here. Mr. Isbell, you had a question?
Well, just a brief question. Are we gonna be able to reconcile with our part-time people, how they have to guess a week ahead?
They will be, what you've got right now is your part-time people are paid current right now. That'll continue in Cronus the same way. About 100 of your employees right now are paid Friday for Friday, and probably courts are part of them. What'll happen when Cronus is completely up, it'll actually come in and it'll drop the week before it's in there, but it'll make an assumption about your time based on what you tell us, and it'll correct it the next following week. But no, your actual part-time employees will be just like they are now. They're all current. Should be. Yours
Or
are.
behind, a week behind.
I'm sorry, a week behind.
They're a week behind,
That's
yeah.
it. I'm a week behind everybody else's current. Your
Yes,
employees say a week
yes.
behind, everybody else will stay current. Because one of the things we don't want to do is hold everybody's pay back a week, because then they're going to tie it to the system. They're going
Yeah.
to be upset. A lot of them are really dependent upon their check. And at the same time, everybody's going to tie the Kronos system onto our lost a week's worth of pay. And you talk about unhappy employees that don't want to do that system. All of us working together for the next 100 years will never be able to get this system in if we do that.
Mhm.
Unless you guys have a different opinion than I do, because it'll be a nightmare. So right now, we've got a way through Kronos when it links with Munis to actually account for all that the way you're running right now. And that was another thing we had to deal with. It took a couple of months, but we've got it about worked out.
So then what's the ask? Is it, so with Catherine representing all the elected officials, is that?
Ask Catherine and Miss Judy and Anthony and the elected to bring it back to their group to see what they can find.
In other words, we'll
That'll
work
work.
with David and we'll work something out. We just need more input.
Yeah, and I guess that, I'm asking questions because without us knowing or having ever seen the Kronos program, it's gonna be hard for us to make policies regarding it without knowing the program or at all.
And
I
some of
mean,
this,
I've
we
seen
may
a
have
little
to
thing at the
start and
courthouse,
try,
but-
and then
and
tweak the policies
alter it.
as we
But
go.
we need something basic
Yeah.
in place.
Right,
Okay.
before we go. And Miss, my employees will be happy if you sit down with them to show you what the system will look
Okay.
like.
Yeah,
They can go through like a finance ones, because they don't care if you look at all their stuff. You can go through some finance time cards. I'll show you basically how it works. Your rules will work differently, but they'll look the same.
yeah,
And the only thing we're really concerned with mainly on the policy is people understand that the system needs to be audible when you audit, when you change things in the system.
yeah.
And then also, you need to, get people to sign off on the timesheets, because if they don't sign off on the timesheets, we won't be able to make payrolls electronically. And then if they're ever audited by wage and hour, there's no sign off, they're pretty much meaningless, and it's not protected anybody. So that's the things, we just want to cover the basics here, not get really extravagant. But I don't think there's no action at this point, other than this is just a starting point to send back to everybody.
Is, you had mentioned like 6 months away type of thing. Is there anything in here that has to be on the policy that's built into the software?
The software already has drop boxes, and we can add more of them. These are just things we need explanations for changes to be audible and sign-offs. So it really covers the basics, but there may be different ways the basics need to
So
be
from the
covered.
time, there's no, when do we need to have this in place, I guess?
EMS, which we'll work with EMS directly, Mr. Holtz, they'll be soon. They'll probably be within the next month, we're hoping. We don't really know for sure.
So does this need to,
I'd say 2 or 3 months would be good.
who all needs to approve this? Us and?
I would think that probably, if it was my desire, that the elected officials would come back with something workable to this committee, or bring me down to their committee if they
Yeah,
had questions
Jerry,
and work something out.
Probably, we need to do some implementation to see what kind of challenges we have. And, you know, we may not adopt a full policy until the very end.
Yeah, I was
Because we need
time.
input and we don't really know what we don't know, right?
Yeah.
That's the issue. And so, in the end, I think as long as we tweak it, and we get a policy that everybody has buy-in with, it'll be fine. Because, really, we've never done this before. We're going to a new system. We're not accustomed to this. It's gonna take some time. We've gotta work together. Because today, if you ask me what the policy needs to be, I don't think I know. I don't think you really know. We know what the basics need to be. But Judy, do you feel the same way? You know, you don't know what you don't know?
Correct. We don't know if it rounds, and what time frame it rounds at, you know, all those
You
things.
good with that?
Does it clock you in and out for lunch? Do you have to clock in and out at lunch?
You've
You know,
got
all those
choices.
things.
You've got choices. You can have an auto or manual.
What does it, do you have a list of, this is optional, or this is what it has to do? This is what it's set up to do. These are some options that we could say, okay, you take this for your department, you take this, you, give each department a list of those and say, well, yeah, we can do this, this is not gonna work, and this is why it's not gonna work. Do you have a list?
We can get you something like that. The reason you haven't worked more on yours, you're on a separate EIN number, so you're the very last one. So like I think they met with you a long time ago, Catherine, to work with rules and stuff. You weren't met with as much because you're on the second group with a whole different EIN number.
Yeah.
And you were pretty happy with your system. I think you got a system right now.
Yeah, we got.
So we moved you the
digital
very
system now.
last to let you get everybody else done before we start looking.
And you'll see kind of what's going on,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can tweak
But,
yours.
I
You're
mean,
at the tail end.
yeah, well, that's good, but other
But each
department
department will be
yeah,
able
need
to,
be.
like,
Yeah.
if I decide for my department, yeah, I want it to automatically clock them out for lunch. That, I mean,
Yeah,
is
we
that
need to
tailored
know.
for each
Yes.
employee
They've
or
been-
just in
Yes.
general?
It's by the
Yes.
department.
At least mine is set, they
Yeah.
have to
Right.
hit it if they're gonna work through lunch, otherwise it.
Right.
So I
And
can
we-
set my department up to do that, but Judy's they can
Right.
all be manual, and
And-
they
and
have to
they-
clock in, clock out, or whatever she decides, right?
And they met with you a long time ago to ask what you
Yeah.
guys done, but if you
Yeah.
wanna make changes, we can still make changes. Because we asked you what you did at the time of preferred, and it's been,
Mhm.
I don't know how long now.
It's been-
Yeah.
So everybody was discussed these options and kind of chose them at the point, but it's been so long.
Yeah,
Just contact Amanda, or she can contact you, and you can talk to her what your options are, say right now.
And when you set it up, Catherine, you may decide, well, that's what I want to do, but that doesn't work out. So say, no, wait a minute, cancel that hot dog. We're going to do it this
We'll
way.
change it.
Change it.
yeah.
To answer one question, it does follow the 7-minute round rule
Okay.
because that's a wage and hour rule.
Yeah.
To get you the closest, but just like my department, because it rounds 7 minutes don't mean you can be late. That only means it rounds it. So if you're late 7 minutes every day, you're still late.
Yeah.
It's not saying you
And
can be
you
late.
As a manager can see
Right.
exactly
Right,
when they
right.
clock in.
Well, you can have it send you
Yeah.
emails. Well, you can do that, or we can even have it send you emails for
They'll send you a
exceptions.
notification if someone clocks in late.
You-
Oh, my employees are gonna hate this.
We can turn it on and
I'm
off.
gonna love it. They are gonna hate it.
We can turn that on or off for you, because mine's on. Some people, I think, want theirs, they want it off. Because you can go in and look anytime too at their schedules, what they've worked, when they've logged.
Yeah,
It's not a terribly complex system, but the first time you got to get used to it. You got to hit save. It's
yeah.
like any other system. It's got its little weird things you just don't love to start with. We haven't got your manager training done yet, so I really don't know.
I'm drowning in that.
She's just in test right now. We haven't done the manager training with her.
I can't find anything.
Well, no, you haven't had manager training yet. We just wanted your people to start clocking and test. You're not in live or anything.
Okay.
Just for your hours.
It's a process.
And it's a big process, but in the long term, it's going to be a good thing for the county if we just get there.
Okay.
It's
All
been
right.
it's going to be a big change.
Yeah.
Here once you-
So we will, talk more about that in our next meeting, whenever we have that.
What is
Whenever
the
we make
timetable?
progress.
What is your timetable?
These
What
are
your
called.
thoughts?
What now?
What is the timetable? for this?
We've got
Open 6 months.
we're
Open 6 months?
we're
To have
hoping
it
6 months.
fully
Everybody but-
implemented?
Well, that's a goal. Now, we don't know if we can do it. We're gonna try.
We know right now EMS is probably going to be on
We're
the next month.
optimistic.
Next
Finance is on, EMS is on, and IT's on right
It
now.
may be
Yeah.
more than 6 months, but it's gonna be less than 5 years.
And I think, Catherine, you were one of those wanted, so I think you were up higher on the list.
Well, are you anticipating that we'll be on it before we move into a new building?
Yes. Way before that. Yes.
That narrows that time frame a little bit.
Whereas we could stick you in a test environment tomorrow and let you start playing with it, but that's gonna be, without training and stuff, it may be more confusing than helpful.
Yeah, no,
Whereas yours is
I'm fine.
completely configured, but the big thing right now, you've gotta be trained and you've gotta test it and test. And the big thing we've run into is because of lack of resources is training everybody.
Yeah.
That's the next, I think it's a huge undertaking.
Okay. Any other discussion? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All right.
Mr. Baker?